If the clerk could please call the roll call.
Board Member Schumacher.
Present.
Vice Chair Becker.
Present.
Chair Haviland.
Present.
Let the record show that all board members are present.
Thank you. And Board Member Schumacher, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
I'd love to. So your hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we have board member comments and announcements. Do any board members have a comment or something they'd like to announce? I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Just quickly, I'm so sorry, Chair.
Yes.
I did want to let the board know that I met with Cal CCA's, the elected official subcommittee, and there was discussed some items around the SDG&E trigger application and the ERA proceedings. And there, I wanted to share that Cal CCA, as well as other advocates, are looking at working with SDG&E and others around the trigger application. And SDG&E had initially proposed a 0% to be paid back immediately, or bringing the amount down to 0%. And so what Cal CCA is looking at is keeping it at 7%, which is basically the highest, and then amortization over a 12-month period. So there's some negotiation going on around that. And at the point, SDG&E, they'll probably go, I think staff will go into it further, but I did want to let you know that, that I was involved with the elected officials advocacy subcommittee around this, and we'll probably hear more about it. I shouldn't go into detail. I think staff will do a better job, but thank you.
Thank you for that update. And do we have any presentations, Ms. Boswell?
No presentations today.
Okay, then we can move on to public participation. Do we have a member of the public who had a non-agenda item?
Yes, we do have one. I'll start. It's from Greg Ferry. In the San Diego Union Tribune of 2 September is an editorial describing the utility of microgrids. I would request that the board read this editorial. I believe that in order to achieve the goals of the CEA, microgrids will be part of the solution. I would like the board to appropriately prioritize a discussion on microgrids. The secretary has been provided a copy of the opinion. Microgrids can shore up the system. The coronavirus pandemic's stay-at-home orders have been driving increased household electricity demand just in time for the annual fire season, to also add to the strains on the power grid. The result has been unfortunate but predictable power outages. The entire state has now been affected by rolling power shutoffs. The California Independent System Operator, which works to maintain the energy grid with utility services, had announced a loss of nearly 1,000 megawatts in power generation caused by the recent heat wave. And this could perhaps happen again during this generation and fire season. The reality of climate change has also meant an increase in the size of the yearly fires by a factor of 5, meaning this problem is likely to occur again in the near future. Some attempted to blame California's increasing utilization of renewable energy, noting intermittently that issues of renewables, for example, the sun doesn't shine at night, making solar panels useless, or the wind doesn't always blow to power turbines. Their prescription: continue to add large and expensive traditional fossil fuel baseload power plants to boost supply and invest the billions needed to upgrade the ancient transmission grid. As a practical consideration, however, such approaches would cost billions in this time of deficits, take years to build, and have to overcome pitched ground battles with civil society because of their reliance on environmentally harmful technology. But a small ball, practical approach exists by setting up renewables-based microgrids. Microgrids simply couple renewables, such as some solar photovoltaic panels, with battery storage and utilize them efficiently via localized control systems. Such a solution is significantly cheaper, especially given the dramatic declines in cost of renewables and batteries. This is in line with the current trend towards a more civil society-based approach to electric power management. such as the Community Choice Initiative, which seeks to increase local control over the power and the utilization of renewables. As a local approach, microgrids also bolster the local system resiliency, and hence critical demand users such as military bases, hospitals, and universities are either setting up or exploring developing microgrids across the country now. Employers may find that having employees work remotely is actually beneficial to productivity and cost, and might continue to have people work remotely after the coronavirus pandemic has passed. This trend could potentially extend the problems, and that's time.
Thank you for that. Was it just the one public comment?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Chair Haviland. I did get a message that it's possible we're not streaming, so I just wanted to confirm with the Carlsbad technology that our streaming is working okay.
I'm checking it right now.
Thank you, Sheila.
We'll wait for that confirmation.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, your background is just so soothing. The tree and the water, the waves. Ty's talking, but he's muted.
Sorry about that, Ms. Becker. Yeah, I've been using this background a little bit here and there, and I, for some reason, could not find my Clean Energy Alliance background. I'll get it back in place, but I've been getting some positive feedback about this one, so thank you.
It looks clean energy, wind.
That's right.
I'm looking online and it is streaming as I'm speaking. So I don't know who might be having problems, but it is on our website.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you for confirming that. Next, we have approval of minutes.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Great. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
The motion passes.
And now we have our consent calendar with 2 items on consent. Do any board members wish to pull an item off of consent?
No.
Okay. And I don't wish to pull an item off consent, but is it possible, Ms. Boswell, to just get a brief update on where we are with our timeline and whether or not we're on track without pulling the item off consent? There's a lot of public interest on that, and I want to make sure it's clear to everyone where we stand.
Thank you, Chair Havlin. I'd be happy to give an update. As you're aware, we had received notification in July that San Diego Gas and Electric's, SDG&E's billing system replacement project was delayed and was impacting our launch schedule, which had been planned to launch or implement across all of our territories in May of 2021. Since that time, we've been meeting regularly with SDG&E. I'm happy to say that they have been working very hard to develop or come up with a plan or a phased approach that minimizes impact to Clean Energy Alliance and its customers, but also minimizes the risk of any billing issues. We're currently looking at a phased approach, which brings in the majority of the customers in Carlsbad and Del Mar and all of the Solana Energy Alliance customers in May of 2021 and a small subset of customers in June of 2021. And those customers have been, SDG&E has identified as having complex billing arrangements. We haven't come to a final decision with regards to the 2-phased approach and who's in each phases. We continue to analyze the data. We are continuing to analyze the impact to our financials of that phased approach, and working with Calpine and SDG&E to see if there are workarounds with regards to being able to keep to our single phase, but we do not want to go that direction and have customers have billing problems. And so we're working through that. We anticipate bringing to the board a final proposal that the board then can take approval, give approval on. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving us that update. Okay, unless there's any other questions or comments, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. And roll call vote, please.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker?
Yes.
Chair Haviland?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now moving on to item 3, the Clean Energy Alliance long-term renewable solicitation.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. I have, going to share my screen for a presentation. The item before the board for consideration is the next step in our long-term renewable solicitation. The recommendation is for the board to authorize the interim chief executive officer to execute term sheets, exclusivity, and confidentiality agreements with those developers that have been shortlisted related to the long-term renewable energy solicitation. At this time, I'd like to invite Brian Goldstein from Pacific Energy Advisors, our technical consultants. He is heading the analysis of the responses that we have had to that solicitation. So Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Just to kind of give a background here per this slide, I think as you all know, it was early July that CEA released a long-term renewable solicitation. There were very favorable and positive results that came in. Solicitation closed on the 27th, so that's when the proposals were due. And as you can see here on the slide, we had 30 different proposers, about 88 different projects, and most of which, per that note, came from the solar plus storage technology, which is the predominant technology that's being deployed in California, as you are all quite aware of right now. We've reviewed the proposals. As I think we've talked about before, the proposals, I think my colleague Kirby saw it actually walk through kind of what the evaluation criteria, what are we looking at when we analyze these projects. And as you can imagine, per that discussion, it's a whole host of criteria. So price, location, each developer has different length of term, size of the project, how does that fit into the portfolio, diversification of technology, diversification of location. And again, from a size perspective, weighing the risk, right, of say going too big or going, say, too small when you have immediate needs, as you all know as well. So as part of that evaluation criteria, we really look to normalize to be able to compare apples to apples to see what are the best bang for your buck, what are the best value projects for CEA. So we've gone through that evaluation. We have notified the suppliers that we'd like to move forward on the short list. They have accepted that notification. And so now, as Barbara had laid out, the next steps are developing a detailed term sheet. And what we mean by detailed term sheet is, the shortlisted entities, they submitted a proposal to CEA, right, in response to the requirements of the solicitation. And so that proposal, those commercial terms is what's been shortlisted. However, as you can imagine, beyond price, volume, location, length of contract, there's other commercial related items that have to be negotiated. For example, one of which is credit support on both sides for the developer and credit support on the side of CEA as the buyer. And the idea of the term sheet is to really hash out those important commercial details beyond, again, what was provided in the proposal, so that the goal is when the term sheet's agreed on and signed, the shortlisted entities will have to submit or post what's called a bid deposit to secure the term sheet and what they're putting in the term sheet as we move into the power purchase agreement, the main contract, right, which will be the long-term renewable contract that CEA in a few months will come to the board. That contract would come to the board for approval and then would get executed if it were approved. So again, the term sheet is kind of the important part here of the process, but along with that is an exclusivity agreement so that these developers can't shop the project around somewhere else as they've been shortlisted and in good faith are working with us to get a contract done. And then a confidentiality agreement, similarly along the lines of an exclusivity agreement, to not be able to say who they're working with and working on a contract with. So these are the beginning steps of the negotiations. There's nothing financially binding to CEA through this process. The only financially binding element is on the developers to post that bid deposit that I required once the term sheet is executed and we move into the PPA negotiation. So just want to make sure that was clear again, that there's no kind of financial liability associated with this part from a CEA perspective.
That concludes our presentation. Chair Haviland and board members, we're happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. So first we'll take questions from members and then we'll see if there's any public comment on this. So board member Schumacher or Chair Becker, any questions at this time? I just have one question, probably for Brian. Could you just give us a feel for the geography that's covered by these proposals that you got? Are there any within the CEA territory? Or are they within the county or in the state? Can we get just a sense for what we have before us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just, and one element of this discussion, right, being in the middle of, these negotiations, there's an element of kind of commercially sensitive information. One of the project, so part of the evaluative criteria was location. Right, obviously understanding and knowing that local is preferred for many reasons. One of the issues in San Diego County is land limitations and cost of land, and so within the actual service territory of CEA, we did not have offers, and again, really related to the land kind of limitations and again cost, right? If there is land available. So that was one thing that we did not receive. However, within San Diego County, Imperial Valley, we look at that as kind of the next level of local, more or less. And there were several projects, you can imagine solar projects in Imperial Valley. There were a couple in San Diego County, which are a rarity. And we are one of the entities, is one of their projects is in Imperial. So we are working with an entity that is developing and have proposed to develop a project in kind of that next level of what we're calling local as part of the evaluation criteria. So at least that gives you a flavor of what we've pursued on kind of within this area up front. And then there's another project that is actually out of state that we're pursuing that could provide a great value to CEA. So again, it's, we look at the full picture, we look at diversity of location, of technology type, and there are some, good opportunities out of state as well. And the state, per the IRP that you all had approved recently and the process that was gone through last month, the state recognizes that they have a need for out of state resources as well. And then from a size perspective, we're not doing a lot on this out of state opportunity, knowing that the preference is in state and as local as possible. So the other thing to say about this solicitation, this is not buying CEA's all of their renewable energy going forward. This is a small bite of the apple. There will be more bites in the future. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. Okay, do we have any public comment on this item?
There is none.
Thank you. All right, board member comments or motions?
I'd be perfectly okay with a motion to approve the recommendations of staff.
And I'll second.
Right. We're ready for a roll call vote.
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4, the Clean Energy Alliance Communications and Marketing Kickoff and Branding.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. One moment, and I will share my screen again. The board has recently selected the firm of Trippepi Smith to provide communications and marketing services. And this is our first, I think, big foray into developing our communications and marketing plan. I have with us representatives from Trippepi Smith who will be walking through the presentation for us. So I would like to invite them to join the presentation. I think we're going to have Kevin Bostwick. Kevin, you're muted.
I was saying thank you, Ms. Boswell.
Okay.
So we are moving forward with the branding exploration for CEA, and we've spent some time gathering some input on the different ways of thinking about how CEA is unique in this marketplace and how these communities are unique. That input has been very helpful in setting some context for us. And so our goal here today is to check in with the board on some of those brand assumptions that we are hearing and to elicit a little bit of conversation and input directly from the board. So we will have some guideposts as we go through and create a logo, color palette, fonts, and some of these things that will come to define the brand and how it appears to the public at large. This first slide is just setting some context for how to think about brand, and it's a little different than thinking about marketing or some of the ways we phrase business mission. This is talking about the personality and how Clean Energy Alliance will present. So one of the things we know is it has to speak directly to the consumers. We know that beyond the consumers, there are community and key stakeholders, which I would include local businesses and nonprofits, all sorts of community entities to whom this brand should also appeal. And it needs to positively reflect the goals that you have set forth for it. So the idea is to create something that essentially captures that. A logo can't do all that by itself. So this is something that happens over time and across materials and through a lot of communications. That's the basic short form about how to think about the brand. The response that we've gotten so far, and we continue to be getting response and we'll be soliciting more from staff, but what we've heard so far hits on a few key points. And I'm looking at my notes here, just to make sure. So obviously clean energy, affordable pricing, the local generation and storage is an important part of it, and the community reinvestment. Speaking here with the team at Trippepi Smith, one of the ways, and just in the flavor and language people have been using when they talk about it, so I also think that there's a remarkable focus on the public and the people that are going to be served. So that's one of the things that we're using to guide this process. I have another slide with some specific questions, more about some of the actual visuals that we think will speak to this, but I'd like to pause and just see if any of the board has a reaction to what I've said so far.
Any comments from board members?
No, thank you.
I think we're tracking with you so far.
Okay, thank you. So this slide is a gathering of a bunch of the logos in your sector, and it's not just to show the competition, it's also to illustrate the different ways that CCAs have been presented. And that will help to drive some of this conversation that we want to have about what would distinguish a Clean Energy Alliance logo and brand in general. So for instance, if you start to scan through some of what's on screen, you will see that there have been some very specific color choices made. There's a whole bunch of greens and blues. Those are clean and green energy focused. Other brands have chosen to focus more on the sort of power colors and the power of energy. You can see that they're beyond just some of the color decisions. Some have gone more abstract. They're going for something that's more modern. Others want it to feel very local, and including, for instance, Apple Valley, literally having the apple, Pomona Choice Energy, hearkening back to their history with the orange groves. So these are setting some different parameters for the different directions that we could go. I have my own personal opinions about that, but I'm just kind of putting out these conversation categories so that the board hopefully can speak without being prejudiced by my opinions about what I've heard so far. There's a number of other things that you can see in here, and as a designer, there are a number of opinions I have about some being more or less effective. But at this point, having not thinking about these entities specifically that you may know of, I'm curious what you think that these brands are saying to their audience and how that might be similar or very different from what you are looking to say at Clean Energy Alliance. And I'll take the board's reaction.
Great. Does someone want to go first? I'm happy to kick things off. I gravitate towards the logos that are more simple and that will look good in lots of different types of ways that it gets displayed. So the San Jose Clean Energy, I think, shows a very simple logo that's going to be easy to read, but also has that little bit of a graphic that shows the sun. And there are other examples of that here, but when you try to put too much messaging or too much detail in a logo, I find it distracting. Other board members?
I really agree with the simple as well. I actually would do well if you gave us like 3 and we could choose one. I mean, you know, I'm much better at that than, but I have to say Solana Energy Alliance is the best. And then, but yeah, simple, simple, simple. I don't even mind if you want to keep it as is. It just doesn't bother me that much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Becker. So I will give you my personal opinion here, which is that the font choices in the current one are powerful and strong, and so probably something that would have that same feeling would be my advice. I do think that as this logo and this brand in general, which is going to be more than just the logo, appears across materials, one of the things that you want is something iconic that people will associate, and as these, so they'll recognize the materials and they'll recognize the brand when it rolls in front of their eyes. So so a text-only lockup, there are entities that do that, but I think even here, and this is again my personal advice, you can see that it's not the first one that draws your eye in this grid.
Board Member Schumacher, did you want to weigh in?
Sure. So I like the idea of the energy side of things versus the locale. So one of the things I like about Peninsula Clean Energy is it captures that concept of energy, and I think even clean a little bit with it, with an almost leafy looking bulb. So if we can focus in on the clean and the energy piece in a more pictorial, I don't know if I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to say that the pictorial over abstract. I like abstract as long as it's focused around an energy piece that we recognize as being clean.
Thank you, Board Member Schumacher. I would agree, and I think it's possible. So one of the ones pointed out here, San Jose Clean Energy, you can see it's very simple, but also is doing something right where it feels like it's a sun, but even that shape could be a light bulb. It's clearly working with the word energy. So that there's a balance of the words and the very, very, very simple iconography there that is I think doing what you're talking about.
Sounds good.
Okay, so thank you very much for that input. That is very helpful, and certainly helpful for one of the first and major challenges, which is actually designing the logo. As you might imagine, distilling a whole entity down into a bold, small thing is like stuffing worms into a jar. So it's it can be a challenge, and what you've given here is very helpful. So in addition to just the logo, though, as I'd mentioned, we need to define colors, we need to define fonts, and we need to set a brand tone for the communications that will come. And this is we have, I'd like to think I can write, but we have specialists here at Trippi Smith that will work more on mission statement, pillars for the brand, and expressing some of these things. These are the parameters that define the voice that will be used for everything from a large brochure down to a social media post. We need to make sure that it's all coming from that same voice. To that end, we have, I believe most of you have received a survey, and the staff should have the survey in their hands. As we get those responses, and thank you for the responses we've received thus far, not only will we be taking some of that for the logo and brand development, but also that will go into generating some of the talking points and the general sort of mission phrasing that we have. So the purpose of the survey is to get a wide range of input from which we can identify the general trends and also identify where there might be points of discord in there, and try to resolve that so that we have a cogent document and brand moving forward. So that's how the results will be used. Next steps is actually one of the more fun parts of the process, which would be to actually have a couple of logo options to react to. So we will get going after we have input from the staff tomorrow, and a few more survey results on doing our exploration on the logo itself. And like I said, that's one of the more fun parts of the process, but at the same time, we will be generating a proposal for the brand communications, definitions, mission statement, etc. At this point, any discussion or questions are welcome.
Any other feedback for Kevin?
Thank you. It's a hard job.
Love it though.
Okay, well, great. I think I will echo what's already been said. I do much better selecting from rather than creating from scratch because it's not my background. So we look forward to the next step.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, item 5, the Clean Energy Alliance Interim Board Clerk Services.
Thank you, Chair Haviland. I will once again share my screen. So as you may recall, when we were developing our budget for the coming year, the member agencies who have been providing support to CEA had indicated that their workloads had gotten to a point where they needed us to look towards bringing more of the functions that they were performing in-house, such as the communications and marketing that the city of Carlsbad had been performing and doing a great job at. One of those is the interim board clerk. I would like to clarify that the board secretary will continue to be Sheila Cobian, the board secretary of record. This position is to provide the clerk services for running the meetings, developing the agenda, and taking minutes. The recommendation before the board for consideration is authorizing the CEA board chair to execute an amendment to the Bayshore Consulting Group agreement to add interim board services through June 30, 2021 for an amount not to exceed $18,000 subject to general council approval. The services will be billed monthly at $65 an hour for the actual hours worked. By way of background, as I mentioned, these services have been provided by the member agencies. We did have 2 candidates that we were considered. They were evaluated and interviewed by the board secretary, the current Carlsbad City Clerk Manager, and myself. And Susan Caputo was selected as best meeting the minimum qualifications and needs of the interim CEA board clerk. And Susan is available for introduction to the board. If she can turn on her video, I will do a quick introduction. Susan does bring 25 years of city clerk experience, having been deputy city clerk. And, you know, I have to say that Sheila Cobian is also on as the board secretary in support of this position. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to Sheila for any other comments and we can introduce Susan.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm excited to hopefully have Susan on board, but I also wanted to mention that the city of Carlsbad will continue to maintain the GPA's vital records in our document management system so that we ensure that all the documents are accessible to members of the public. So Susan will provide them to us and we will upload them into our system until such time as the JPA has their own system. And welcome, Susan, if you want to say a few words. You're muted.
Thank you. Hello. I am so looking forward to serving the board and working with all of you. And I'm excited to get started. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have, Chair Haviland or board members.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the board members have any questions of Susan? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
I motion to bring Miss Susan on board and execute the services in the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
And roll call vote, please.
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Susan, welcome to the team. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Item 6, Clean Energy Alliance Legislative and Regulatory Policy Platform.
Okay, I will once again share my screen. The item before the board for consideration at this time is to review and provide input and consider approval of the Clean Energy Alliance 2020 Legislative and Regulatory Policy Platform. The Legislative and Regulatory Policy Platform serves as a guide to CEA board and staff and advocacy efforts. It provides guidance to the interim CEO in taking positions on legislative and regulatory matters that are presented before the CalCCA board in my role as representing on the board of directors. The policy platform is a common practice for CCAs to adopt, and the proposed platform has been modeled after similar policies that CCAs have adopted. It has been, the proposed platform is consistent with the Clean Energy Alliance JPA agreement and stated goals, including procuring and developing electrical energy for customers, addressing climate change by reducing energy-related greenhouse emissions, promoting electrical rate stability and cost savings to our customers, fostering consumer choice and local economic development, such as job creation, local energy programs, and local power development. These stated goals were then used to develop 4 basic principles. Those principles are protecting CEA's local control for the purpose of preserving the ability to self-procure its power resources, to self-determine its rates and the energy programs it offers its residents, businesses, and communities it serves. Ensuring fair treatment of Clean Energy Alliance customers by the PUC and other state agencies, supporting the recognition that electricity is an essential service and that CEA should have the ability to set electric rates that are affordable and competitive to the utilities. And lastly, pursuing environmental initiatives that exceed minimum state mandates, promote the growth in renewable energy capacity at the local level, encourage clean energy adoption by CEA customers, and reduce fossil fuel dependency. Based on those, the policy platform establishes the following positions: to support legislation and regulatory actions which enables, protects, and enhances the development and expansion of CCA programs, supports independence in procurement, program development, management, and decision-making, to support legislation and regulatory actions which allows CEA to develop and procure local energy generation resources to meet the needs of its electric customers, to support legislation and regulatory actions which promote a neutral, fair, and competitive energy market, to oppose legislation and regulatory actions that jeopardize CEA's independence to self-procure its power resources, determine its rates, and the energy programs it provides to its customers in the present, or could restrict its independence to do so in the future. The policy platform will be returned to the CEA board for review and update in January of each year. And that does conclude my presentation. I am happy to take any questions, and we'll stop sharing my screen here.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Any questions from board members? And I don't always remember to ask, but I just want to confirm, is there any public comment on this agenda item?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I think you've done an excellent job, Ms. Boswell, of bringing this forward. And if there's no feedback from the board, then I think we're ready for a motion to approve.
I would so move.
Second.
Board Member Schumacher,
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker,
Yes.
Chair Haviland,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, moving on to item 7, the Clean Energy Alliance bid evaluation criteria policy.
Thank you, Chair. I will once again share my screen. The item for consideration before the board is to approve the proposed Clean Energy Alliance bid evaluation criteria policy. On July 16th, the CEA board considered 2 alternative bid criteria and scoring system methodologies. The CEA board selected a method that assigns high, medium, low, and or a neutral ranking to priority criteria. The evaluation criteria will apply to non-energy goods or services in excess of $100,000 and power purchase agreements with third parties and CEA-owned projects to the extent permitted by law. Evaluation criteria categories were identified by reviewing the JPA agreement and CEA adopted policies. The suggested categories include dollar value, innovation, development risk as applicable to the item being proposed, project location, local economic sustainability, local job growth, and workforce development. The proposed policy applies ranking as follows. For dollar value, proposals will be ranked based on the dollar value as compared to other proposals received and CEA cost estimates. For the category of innovation, a novel, innovative, or otherwise meritorious concept, application, approach, or method would receive a high ranking, and those that did not contain a novel, innovative, or otherwise meritorious concept would receive a neutral ranking. In development risk, we would rank the development as either being high or good or low, meaning bad, with regards to elements such as site control, the interconnect status, environmental impacts, land use and permits, project financing, and developer experience. For the category of project location, we would use the CEA board defined local criteria as being high if the project is in San Diego County or any additional area served by Clean Energy Alliance. Medium would be other areas within California, and low would be out-of-state projects. For the category of local economic sustainability, bids would receive a high ranking for this category if they demonstrated multiple benefits. Those benefits would include provides additional societal, health, economic, or environmental benefits that are beyond the climate and GHG reduction benefits. Low ranking would be assigned if the project does not demonstrate the local economic sustainability as defined above. Local job growth. Proposals would receive a high ranking in this area if they employ workers and use businesses in San Diego County and any additional areas served by Clean Energy Alliance. The bids would receive a low ranking, or proposals would receive a low ranking if they employ workers and use businesses outside what we have defined as local area, which is within San Diego County and any additional areas served by Clean Energy Alliance. Under the category of workforce development, if the proposal employs workers from San Diego County and any additional areas served by CEA, utilizes apprenticeship programs, follows fair compensation practices, including proper assignment of work to crafts that traditionally perform work, would receive high. And those that do not demonstrate that criteria above would receive a low ranking. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Great. Questions for Ms. Boswell? Yes, Board Member Schumacher.
Thank you very much. Looking at the local economic sustainability piece here, it looks like there's benefits that are both economic and environmental in nature. Was this kind of the idea in looking at some other evaluation criteria? Was this kind of the location of possibly looking at benefits to disadvantaged communities as well as some additional environmental stewardship options, kind of compacted into one? Am I kind of receiving that correctly?
Thank you, Board Member Schumacher. Yes, you are. So it was a way to bring in other economic factors that would address those sorts of criteria.
Okay. Thanks. That's the only question I have.
All right, and do we have public comment on this item?
We do. We have one speaker.
Okay.
Dear Chair Haviland and CEA board members, on behalf of IBEW 569, we offer the following recommendations regarding item 7, CEA bid evaluation criteria policy. Number 1, incorporate criteria on benefits to disadvantaged communities. Number 2, incorporate criteria on environmental stewardship. Number 3, edit reference to apprenticeship to read State of California approved apprenticeship programs. Item number 4, incorporate local job creation criteria outlined below. High, renewable energy storage or renewable plus storage project that creates new local jobs. Medium, new renewable energy storage or renewable plus storage project that creates new jobs in California. Low, purchasing energy from an existing project. These additional criteria will strengthen the policy in terms of equity, community benefits, and sustainable development. Thank you for your consideration. Micah Matrosky, Environmental Organizer, IBEW 569. Those are all the comments.
Thank you. All right, board member comments. Who would like to get started? Well, I would like to just confirm a lot of us in our climate action plans have social equity as one of the goals. I know that's in the Del Mar Climate Action Plan, and I think we all see as Clean Energy Alliance as one of the key tools of implementing our climate action plans. And so I just wanted to ask the other board members if that was also in their city's climate action plans, and do we think that this this policy here is supporting that goal?
Are you asking whether or not the staff recommended bid evaluation criteria policy covers social equity?
Yes, do you think that having this criteria is going to help further that goal?
Yes, I do believe it will.
Connected to mobile device.
Okay.
So
yeah,
on the local economic sustainability piece, I think there's an opportunity to get more specific about benefits that would impact social equity. So I would actually like that kind of pulled apart a little bit more so that we're more clear on the social equity piece. That was something that I saw could possibly be tinkered with a little bit. I wonder if that's what you're thinking as well.
yes, I would support being a little bit more explicit in that one category to make sure it's in line with some good comments that we got from the public, as well as just what our own cities have in our adopted climate action plans. So I think putting in more explicit language around environmental stewardship and around helping disadvantaged communities or programs that help disadvantaged communities would be appropriate in the local economic sustainability category. Or I don't know if we feel like we need another category to meet these criteria.
Chair Havlin, I do think maybe the CEO and I can, for the next meeting, work on maybe breaking it down to 2 categories. It may be easier to actually add one more category here to try and capture all the thoughts that have been expressed there.
Sure.
I do want to just make a few comments that I guess if you're defining some terms, because it just, to me, you know, these terms are terms of art. And so we've got to all be clear what we all mean by disadvantaged communities, because when you look at the definition by the CPUC, their definition would mean that all of our communities, Solana Beach, Del Mar, and Carlsbad, would be excluded from any projects, because that definition just alone excludes all of it. And so I'm kind of confused. We really want local projects. And so we need to make sure that we're not excluding the main thing that we're trying to do here, making this local. And the same thing with the environmental stewardship. It's a term of art. So I don't think just throwing that into our bid criteria is going to be the smartest thing to do, because you know, you can't get any more environmental stewardship than forming a CEA. So it's going to be confusing. And the last thing we want to do is limit the projects that we go after. And especially saying that any existing project out there is actually going to get a low score, because, you know, we are such a small new CEA. I just don't want to go limiting our prospects right now. And so I just want to caution everybody that we just need to be careful right now, that we want to keep our options open. I mean, I think we heard on the long-term contracts that they have to look at a few out-of-state projects or whatever. I mean, we just have to be, the whole point of our CEA as opposed to a larger CEA was that we're nimble, we're flexible. So we just need to be careful that we don't limit too much where we're not going to get any bids from anybody because nobody can meet our criteria. So I'm just stating that we just need to be careful with these definitions and throwing terms of art in there.
I appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Schumacher, did you want to comment?
Oh no,
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay. I understand your concern, Vice Chair Becker. It's definitely not my intent to limit. It's my intent to lay a groundwork that's consistent with all the values of our board. And so, for example, we already have location in as a criteria, and we heard in an earlier agenda item that there were very few options that met that criteria. It doesn't mean that we're not going to still be able to purchase power and get up and running and be a successful JPA. It just means that right now there aren't a lot of options in that category. But as a board, if we want to make a priority to have those types of options in the future, then I think it's reasonable to spell it out in our bid criteria so that it's clear what we're hoping to be able to do. It's definitely not my intent to make it limiting on the board, but I do want to be very clear about what it is we're trying to do.
And I think that yeah, and I agree. And I think a lot of these things are, you know, 3 years down the road. And so that's my concern, is that we put this stuff in and all of a sudden we can't even get off the ground. So I want, you know, we have a fiscal fiduciary duty to this CEA, and we need to make sure that we get off to a good start. And, you know, before we put our maybe specific values on this, you know, let's this is a fabulous thing that is happening. So let's make sure that we can not work our way out of having, you know, contracts that are going to be cost effective at the beginning. And, you know, we're going to do all these great things, but it's 3 years down the road. I mean, it's just not right now. And I'm just concerned with every little time that we chip away and we chip away and we chip away at things, we're just going to be getting ourselves in trouble with, you know, before we get off the ground is my concern.
Okay. Yes, Board Member Schumacher.
I appreciate the conversation. It's interesting that if you look at the local economic sustainability category for high, and you compare that with the clean power evaluation criteria, Clean Power Alliance, which is where this is largely pulled from, you'll note that the language is exactly the same as their environmental stewardship option.
Who's there? Who are you talking about?
The Clean Power Alliance. So what we've done is, instead of saying environmental stewardship, we've exchanged that and put in local economic sustainability. So the category for high is exactly the same. So I just, the reason I'm saying this is because we're doing the same thing as other joint powers are doing. We're just now fussing over whether or not to call it environmental stewardship or local economic sustainability. And so I wonder if putting in a medium option under the local economic sustainability just to flesh it out might actually, instead of putting in environmental stewardship, because we're already actually accomplishing the environmental stewardship language, it's exactly the same, but we're calling it economic sustainability, which I think was a very artful choice by staff, actually. And then if we just put in a medium and low and then incorporate language with regard to the social equity piece, if that might satisfy both sides of the conversation.
I think it'd be worth looking at. I don't think there's a sense of urgency to approve this today. Is that correct, Ms. Boswell?
There's not. We brought it back at board's direction. They requested this come back after we had adopted the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. So that this was in response to that request.
Okay, great. And Vice Chair Becker, are you open to looking at other options before making a decision?
Oh yes, that's fine if we want to bring it back.
Okay, great. Okay. Other feedback on this for staff before we ask them to go and do their magic? Yes.
I am actually interested in either in the local job growth, I think probably in the local job growth, whether or not we want to incorporate some language around job creation. And granted, this is just the categorization of high or low or whatever, but we all have expressed the desire for job creation. And we don't have that language in here. And I'm wondering if either in the local job growth or in the workforce development, we might add in language that would be supportive of creating new local jobs.
I think that is captured in, if I might ask our attorney or Ms. Boswell, do you feel that that's captured in the bid criteria? We have a local job growth. What does that mean then?
We have used, Vice Chair Becker, we use the language from the Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy with regards to supporting employing workers and businesses. It doesn't specifically, though, indicate that they would be new jobs.
Okay, I guess it's so local jobs versus creating new jobs, you're saying. But again, I think that goes back to, you know, if there's an existing project out there that's really, you know, something that is reasonably priced, it's reliable, it's fabulous, we would like to do that project, then you're saying if there's no new job creation, it's going to be scored low. So I just don't, again, I don't really feel like that it's appropriate to start limiting ourselves before we have, you know, some reserves in the banks. We know what's doing, we know what all these regulatory matters, which way they're going to go. So again, I think way too early to be doing stuff like that. You know, once we have more decisions made, once we know when we're going to launch, once we know more things, I think you can get a little bit more picky. But right now, I don't really want to go being super picky and inflexible right now.
So can I just ask staff? I'm reading local job growth, and then I'm reading workforce development, and I'm reading something similar where we're talking about employing workers in San Diego County and in additional areas, both in the local job growth as well as in the workforce development. And I'm wondering if in the workforce development, there might be the place where we might be able to incorporate a high, medium, and low, where we talk about new local jobs, given we have already emphasized employing local workers in the local job growth.
It would be to the board's preference if they'd like to do that. I don't see any reason not to consider it, but
just checking for me. I'm so sorry, Ms. Boswell, but just checking for me. Am I reading that correctly, that the local job growth and the workforce development both emphasize in the high employing locally?
They both do have in there that there's a high if they employ workers. The workforce development goes further and speaks to utilizing workers that are from apprenticeship programs. It follows fair compensation practices and includes proper assignment, which is a language the board had adopted in their inclusive and sustainable workforce policy.
Certainly. So then, if we have the exact same language for local job growth as well as workforce development, then we're grading the same thing twice. So it might be in the workforce development that we think of being able to give a little added extra points to creating new local jobs, because we're already employing workers locally and giving projects benefit for that. Does that make sense to the board members?
Would that be limiting our ability to more than what is the staff recommendation, Ms. Boswell or Mr. Stepanisic? I don't know if you want to weigh in or not.
I think with regards to, looking at, there's a lot of overlap between local job growth and workforce development, but there is a difference, as Ms. Boswell has pointed out, in that workforce development is a little bit more focused on developing better paying jobs, having skilled labor involved in the projects, whereas local job growth is really focused on the local jobs. And really, I think the idea of creating new jobs falls within local job growth. So as I have read it, that the idea of either employing local persons or creating new jobs would be part of local job growth. So I don't think local job growth itself really is exclusive of the idea of creating new jobs. I think it probably fits more in that category.
Right. I mean, I'm satisfied with how the criteria is laid out as is. I don't want to go fine tuning that to limit ourselves any more than that is doing. I mean, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to create we're creating local jobs, hopefully, if there is any to be had. And so anyway, that's how I feel.
I have a question. I don't know if this is, for Mr. Stepanisic or Ms. Boswell, but I don't see us putting this big criteria as a way to limit our choices, but as a way to encourage choices that are attractive to our goals as a JPA. And so I guess I don't understand, because we already have, aspirations here that aren't necessarily available today in our region, but we would really like for them to be. And so do we see this as a way of limiting our choices or just defining our preferences? Maybe I put this the wrong way.
I think it is heavily related to expressing and defining preferences. We have stayed away from a numerical scoring system, which I think is problematic. because that is really limiting, and it puts you in a tough spot where you end up maybe not getting the best project. In this case, we have really subjective criteria that the board ultimately will be weighing, and you'll be presented with rankings that do show the high rankings, middle rankings, or low rankings. At the end of the day, though, the board is going to have the discretion to decide which project it's going to pick. And so you're going to be making, as a board, you're going to be making the subjective judgments on each of these projects, and you're probably going to be balancing off various factors here against each other in making your final selection. So I think this is how this particular type of policy will actually work in practice.
Okay. Okay. So I think it'd be helpful to have another crack at this and see if we can make some of the changes we talked about today and come back and have another discussion about this at the board, rather than trying to finalize it today. Is that, I see Board Member Schumacher nodding. Vice Chair Becker, are you okay with taking another shot at this at our next meeting?
Maybe I don't mind looking at it, but again, I really want to keep these terms general and not specific, and terms of art and things like that, just to leave our path wide open as to, I mean, I think I think staff recommendations right now capture exactly what we've been talking about. So I'm happy with the criteria as is, but I would be happy to look at proposed changes.
I think there's ways that we can make a few changes that won't limit our path, but will just be more clear. But we'll have to decide that as a board.
Well, one thing too that I think that Ms. Boswell and I will discuss here before the next meeting is maybe also maybe having some descriptive language within the policy about how you actually apply all these criteria, because we have all these categories here, but the policy itself doesn't actually say how you're going to actually employ them. So I think that's something that could be, I think, helpful to the board if we could make that clearer as to how you utilize these factors in making your decision, which really, in preserving your discretion, really that's important here to come up with what you think to be the best project at the time that you're making your decision.
Okay. Okay. Any other feedback for our staff? All right.
Oh, quick question.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. One of the things that I really love is that we've added an innovation section. And I really love that. And I didn't want to pass by without kind of highlighting that this is something that we're adding in here that really reflects who we are as a JPA. And that piece of the puzzle really is where, for me, I'm thinking the new renewable energy storage projects really live, is actually within that that criteria. And I'm wondering if I'm interpreting that in the same way that it's meant by staff. Is that where we might really look at where the new projects would be? Okay, I'm getting a good strong nod from Greg. Okay, great, thank you. And I appreciated that very much.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the area where we're going to be able to create the projects that are actually within our local communities, because doing things the way we've always done at our land values is never going to pencil out. So it's going to take innovation to get the local projects. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Ms. Boswell, do you have everything you need on this agenda item?
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right. Great. Next, agenda item 8 is the Clean Energy Alliance Award Scheduling Coordinator Services.
Thank you, Chair Haviland, and I will share my screen once again. The item before the board for consideration is continuation of RFQ 2020-004, which is now requesting authorization to award the scheduling coordinator services piece. The recommendation is to authorize the interim chief executive officer to execute the agreement with the Energy Authority to provide scheduling coordinator and congestion revenue rights portfolio management services. through June 30, 2023, for an annual amount not to exceed $140,400 to be billed monthly at $11,700, plus a one-time fee of $28,700. And it's key to note here that the services don't begin being billed until we are up and running, and this would be subject to General Counsel approval. By way of background, the board authorized the issuance of the RFQ that included scheduling coordinator services in May 2021, and the responses were due for that in June 17th, 2020. Included in the scope of work for scheduling coordinated services are scheduling of load into the California Independent System Operator system, validating statements related to that load for load settlements or payments that are due, minimizing and managing real-time load imbalance exposure, which is one of the risks that we have. So this position, these services are key in minimizing risk. Managing our congestion revenue rights portfolio, bidding into the congestion revenue rights auctions for the benefit of Clean Energy Alliance, scheduling a future Clean Energy Alliance owned renewable generation project. So this is a future scope. And then posting of California ISO collateral obligations. We had 4 responses for that portion of the RFP. The proposals were evaluated and a short list of firms to be interviewed was developed. The 3 firms that were included on the short list were Direct Energy, Energy Authority, and Z Global. Through the evaluation and interview process, the Energy Authority was selected as a most qualified, cost-effective consulting services. And we do have representatives from the Energy Authority available for the board should you have questions or comments from them. And this does conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Boswell? No. I had one question, and this is just to clarify. I know you explained this earlier on the call we have before this meeting, but I think I would like to hear it again, and there may be people in the public who read this board packet who want to understand. In the notes on that grid that showed the 3 options, the Direct Energy had a note that said included a guarantee of positive new revenue related to CRR portfolio management. And I would just love to hear an explanation again of what that means and why that was something that we didn't choose.
Thank you, Chair Havlin, for that question. Congestion revenue rights is a program that as a load serving entity, Clean Energy Alliance can participate in. It is a way to offset costs that we may incur related to congestion on the grid. As a load serving entity, Clean Energy Alliance is awarded allocations, and we can bid or request certain paths that are, one may be more valuable than the other. And then we have the opportunity to monetize those paths. That monetization doesn't necessarily come with, there's risk involved in that, and you may or may not realize revenue. The revenues that we would realize from participating in this process are not currently built into the pro forma, so they will be new and additional revenues, and they are revenues that CCAs earn through their activities. Direct Energy is, I guess I would say, a bit more aggressive in how they manage those portfolios and determining what paths might be more valuable. And as such, their proposal for providing those services was a contingent-based proposal, whereby we would the fee related to that would be 20% of any revenue generated by those services or those activities would be the amount that was due to in payment to Direct Energy. In speaking with our general counsel, Greg Stepanisic, with regards to it, and as part of that, they included in their proposal that they would guarantee that we would have positive new revenues related to CRR portfolio management. I would say that we will see positive new revenues regardless from the Energy Authority in their management of the portfolio as well. You know, Direct Energy is proud of their history of managing CRR portfolios and feels that they have generated even more revenue than the CAs may have otherwise realized, and because of that, base their fee on 20% of the revenue that's generated. Being that we are new, and it's very difficult to quantify potentially what that 20% cost would be, or payment to the vendor, to the consultant for those services. We were uncomfortable in making that recommendation to the board. The Energy Authorities includes those services in their monthly fee of $11,700. They have also a track record of generating revenue to CCAs as a result of their management of the portfolios. And because of the uncertainty of what that 20% of revenue costs would be, we were more comfortable making the recommendation with the proposal and costs from the Energy Authority. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I don't know if Mr. Stepanisic would like to add to that.
No, I think that really explains the concerns we had with the uncertainty about what our actual compensation would end up being to Direct Energy. And that's why we felt that a hard cost proposal was, at this stage of the game, a more conservative approach to take.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, I will add that I did ask Direct Energy if they would consider a cap. So it would be 20% up to a certain amount, but that was not something they typically do. They do have these type of arrangements with other CCAs, and at this time they were not, a cap was not something that they would consider offering.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. All right, other board comments or a motion?
I'd move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker? Chair Haviland?
Yes. All right, item 9, the Clean Energy Alliance bylaws.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, but General Counsel Mr. Stepanisic will make the presentation.
All righty, before the board this afternoon are draft bylaws, and we have drafted these with keeping in mind to get your input today if there's any other particular areas that you think would be helpful to be addressed within the bylaws. With our CCA, like other CCAs, the actual JPA agreement contains a lot of procedural requirements within it, such as how the board operates and how the board gets selected, selection of your chair and vice chair, and so on. So for that reason, we haven't duplicated that within the bylaws themselves, and that makes these bylaws maybe a little bit shorter than some bylaws maybe for other organizations that don't go into so much detail in their underlying JPA agreement. A couple items I would like to point out to the board that we have addressed, which was in Article 3, Section 2 on board agendas. We did address the manner in which items can be added to the agenda and how agendas are prepared. So this provision as drafted provides that the agenda for all board meetings shall be prepared by the CEO in consultation with the chair of the board. But then at board meetings, 2 or more members of the board may ask for items to be added to the agenda for the next meeting. With respect to our committees, we have a section that deals with and describes the Community Advisory Committee, our only committee that we have at this point in time. And it gives an overview of that, but the details are actually left to the policy that the board has adopted. And the bylaws do make reference to that particular policy. And last, they did have some additions, a small addition to section 2 of Article 5 dealing with meetings, and this deals with special meetings. And Chair Haviland had asked that we add a little more detail on how a special meeting is called. And the Brown Act is very specific about how special meetings are called, and that's under Government Code Section 54956. But we thought it would be helpful to actually just briefly describe how that process works within the bylaws themselves, which are a lot easier to access than the government code. So we did add language to section 2 that says that the special meeting may be called by the chair or a majority of the board, provided that the notice of the meeting is given at least 24 hours in advance, and those are all required by the Brown Act. Also points out that only those items or matters listed in the notice of the meeting actually may be part of the agenda and discussed by the board at the special meeting. And lastly, we do have a Article 6 dealing with how these bylaws may be amended. And with respect to the JPA agreement, it does require a 2/3 vote of the board. For the case of bylaws, typically the requirement is only a majority vote, which is what we put into this agreement. The current time, the 2/3 and a majority vote are the same, with only having 3 members on the board. But as you go forward with more members to the JPA, that does make a difference and to simply have a majority vote requirement. But if there's going to be an amendment to the bylaws, they need to be proposed at a first meeting and then cannot be adopted, though. They have to then be brought back to the board at a second meeting to make sure that everyone has a chance to digest, understand what the change in the bylaws are going to be. So that's overview of what has been prepared, and definitely happy to answer any questions you have, and also to entertain any additional matters that you think should be added to the bylaws.
Thank you for the presentation. And do we have questions from board members? All right, not seeing any questions. And do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Thank you. All right, and I assume the bylaws that you're looking for approval are the version that you emailed before the meeting today that has the addition?
Yes, with the special meetings, that is correct. So it would be the bylaws as were amended.
Okay, great. Any comments or a motion? Yes, Board Member Schumacher.
Really quick question. I'm so sorry, but on the Article 3 board agendas, was the intent to get a majority when it says 2 or more members? Was this a majority vote?
Well, at this point it would be, but in the future, if you have more board members, it would still need to be 2 members. So at some point you would have less than a majority. Could add items to the agenda.
Got it. Okay. That's exactly what I wanted to know. If it was just going to be 2 or if it was just going to be a simple majority moving forward, but this is great. Thank you.
All right, is there a motion for approval?
Yeah, I would move approval of the Clean Energy Alliance bylaws.
Second.
And we're ready for the roll call vote.
Board Member Schumacher?
Aye.
Vice Chair Becker?
Yes.
Chair Haviland?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the last agenda item is any board member requests for future agenda items. Seeing none, we have completed our agenda. So thanks everyone for another productive meeting. Look forward to seeing you all next month. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.